Hello, welcome to today's video. Today I wanted to take a look at the massive Katana Fleet composed of 200 Dreadnaught-class heavy cruisers and the colossal Eternal Fleet, an ancient armada from the time of the Old Republic. They shared one key feature which made them both highly potent and yet deeply flawed. That and more in today's video. With exception of the Sith Eternal Fleet at Exegol and the Legends New Republic 5th Fleet, both of these are considered to be the largest singular task force in lore. And yes, before anyone thinks or says anything about how there are larger fleets, I'm aware, but for the purpose of the topic, trust me, there's a reason. The Katana Fleet, or the Dark Force, was launched by the Galactic Republic during its final years. Completed in 46 BBY, was composed of 200 Dreadnought-class cruisers, all carrying experimental AT-PT walkers. The fleet itself was named after its flagship, the Katana. Now, the Dreadnought line of ships were notorious for their crippling crew requirement of over 16,000 personnel to run at a peak efficiency, which is perhaps the highest crew per kilometer ratio for any modern starship. Compare that with the Imperial 1 class Star Destroyer for about 37,000 personnel. The ISD-1 was 1,600 meters, or 1.6 kilometers, while each dreadnought was simply 600 meters, which means that you would need to have about 2 dreadnoughts and 2/3 of one more to reach the length of a Star Destroyer, with a combined personnel of 42,560 for the dreadnoughts, far higher than the Imperial 1 class. To counter this titanic crew requirement, the fleet was extensively modified with full-rig slave circuitry, reducing the burden to about 2,200 personnel each. And I do want to mention that this isn't taking stormtroopers into account, only enlisted personnel required to keep the ISDs running. This slave circuit allowed for remote control of the vehicle's systems, with all 199 ships remote controlled from the Katana flagship, which should have been a demonstration of efficiency quickly turned into utter catastrophe when a crewmate aboard one of the ships picked up a hive virus during the fleet's maiden voyage, a virus which particularly drove its victims insane. The crewers, instead of calling for help, slaved their ships together, and when the Katana command crew went insane, they jumped blindly into hyperspace, taking the entire fleet with them. With time, the Katana fleet became all but a legend, as hopes of ever finding even a fleet so large was near impossible. The Eternal Fleet was an armada of warships utilized by the Eternal Empire during the time of the Old Republic. Numbering in the hundreds, it's safe to assume that it was much larger than the Katana fleet. The distinction here being that each warship was operated by sentient droids called the Gemini, all of which were controlled from the Eternal Throne. As you can imagine, yet again, one single control point proved to be the fleet's fatal weakness, compounded by the newly gained free will of the Gemini droids, which ultimately led to the fleet's destruction through infighting. By the time of the Katana fleet crisis, galactic civilization had largely forgotten of the Eternal Empire, and although both fleets didn't directly cause this shift away from automated ship functions, they definitely sealed its outcome. And here's the thing, I think that slave-rigged ships are incredibly useful, and likely allow for the fielding of a substantially larger fleet, as you would now have the manpower necessary. However, when you look at the tantalizing drawbacks suffered by the Katana and Eternal fleets respectively, not to mention the extreme disdain for droids following the end of the Clone Wars, it's almost no surprise that there is a lack of automation among military vessels. In fact, we see this in Skeleton Crew with the Overseer of Ad-Aden. He's basically AI, sentient to an extent, and when he was knocked out, everything on Ad-Aden just stopped. In a way, it was all slave-rigged. The system was incredibly efficient, just so long as the control computer wasn't destroyed, similar to the B-1 battle droids deployed on Naboo by the Trade Federation during the events of the Phantom Menace. In 9 ABY, the Katana fleet came to be discovered by Grand Admiral Thrawn, taking with him a considerable portion of the lost fleet to aid in his goal of restoring the Empire. And in similar fashion, the Empire before its fall could have greatly benefited from such large-scale automation. A Star Destroyer's still safe to operate crew minimum was about 2,000 enlisted members, with a peak of 26,000 ISDs, the crew required to run them at peak efficiency without automation would be around 962 million enlisted personnel. But if you automate the destroyers just enough for them to be run with 2,000 enlisted personnel, you would only need about 52 million people. With a surplus manpower of 910 million, the Empire could have forwarded the supplies from the Death Star to create an even larger, more expansive naval military. I think that's all we have for today's video, and if you enjoyed, remember to absolutely delete that like button and subscribe. This is Marcos, here to remind you that the Republic couldn't have asked for better soldiers, nor I a better friend.